Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another financial episode with Jennifer Johnson. She is our certified financial planner with Three Magnolias Financial Advisors located in Winston-Salem. As of our recording, we are 4 days shy of Mother's Day. I hope that doesn't
That's right.
ring any alarm bells for people because they haven't thought about it until now. But if it has, you have plenty of local resources to be able to take care of mom the way that she deserves to be taken care of, not just on Mother's Day, but on every day throughout the year, right? Let me be the first to say that every day should be Mother's Day, right?
There you go.
And
There you go.
as a result, we thought it would be interesting to talk finances with a couple of moms. Um, and that's not me. I'm not a mom. True story. So we invited another mom to join us to bring another perspective to today's conversation. So Jennifer, mother of two,
That's
I
right.
will let you tell the listeners what we're going to be talking about, and also bring on our guest for today's show.
Yeah, because we thought about what to talk about here for this month's podcast with Mother's Day coming up, couldn't help but think, what a great topic would women and financial security be. And as you mentioned, I'm a mom, but I asked special guest Kelley Gondring, who's a local family law attorney, to join us. She has her firm Gondring Law, which is in Winston-Salem as well. And she and I have worked together on cases, especially involving cases where women have gone through divorce, because that's a big financial event. That's certainly not the most fun event, but it is a one of those things that happen in people's lives, and it affects their finances. And we have a lot of shared values, Kelly and I do. One, we really want people to be thoughtful when they go through events like that and think about the decisions they make and how that sets them up for the future. And really want to set, what we want to talk about today is how, moms and women in particular can set themselves up for a good financial future, what a gift that is to their family, because moms do a lot for their family, as we all know, and and honor them. I tell my children Mother's Day is the most important day of the year. They don't seem to agree with that. And Kelly also is a mom of two as well. And she has helped a lot of women. And I know, again, we share a lot of those traits in common. So, Kelly, share, I guess, a little bit about what you do and how you work with folks.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me on, Jennifer. And I always enjoy having cases with you. Um, I do a particular type of family law called collaborative divorce, and I work as a mediator. And so, in those spaces, it's really about trying to help clients find an empowered space. Like you
Mm.
said, most people who are going through a divorce, I kind of joke. I'm like, I recognize that through this relationship, you'll probably, hopefully, find that you like me, but you're not going to send me a birthday card, right? You're not going to follow up later because I sort of represent a really, really hard time in their
Yeah,
life.
right,
And that's really hard for folks. But there are a lot of folks, particularly women, who come in and what they have been doing is running a lot of the day-to-day of their household.
yeah.
And a lot, not all, but a lot aren't feeling super comfortable with what the finances are going to look like in sort of a broader sense. Um,
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
trying to help educate, but also empower them to make decisions for their financial future is a huge part of what we do in this space.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and I found, you and I've talked about this before. We don't want to make the whole podcast obviously about divorce, but
Right.
I think it's relevant as people plan their financial futures, because a lot of times people would go through this life event and they would work with an attorney and they would sort things out, who gets what, who's responsible for what, and then they would seek out financial advice, right? And so I felt like, wow, a lot of times I wish I'd been involved in those conversations earlier. And I think one of the nice things about your collaborative process is it brings people in so they can understand the trade-offs, right? And so that's a lot of what we talk about, and helping all clients, men, women, whoever, think about what are the trade-offs, in how the resources you have, the income you have, where you're spending that. So it's one of those moments. It's a key kind of milestone moment. It's not pleasant, as you said, but I
Right.
think you try to make it as pleasant as possible. I'll say that. So, and I appreciate that about you. And it affects everybody. I mean, not just women. Certainly, it affects everybody involved, I think. But I do think it's interesting, over my career, and we have some interesting historical facts to share, or I find them interesting. So we'll go through those too, because I think it's eye-opening to me how, of course, as we think way back in history, women's involvement in the finances of the household and their rights, certainly we know those were really different 100 years ago.
Right,
Um,
right.
but even in modern times, it's I guess it's eye-opening to me to see, okay, not that long ago, what our legal rights were even. And I think back about my own career too, which I'm happy to share that too. It's been interesting to me to see the evolution. I still see it somewhat with clients because I work with people of so many different ages, what the role of the women are in the household, right? When it
Oh,
comes to
absolutely.
finances, it's really evolved, I think, significantly from what I see.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's, one of the beautiful things about marriage is that you get these sort of economies of scale and you don't have to do everything, right? So it actually, I tell
Yeah.
clients all the time who are feeling um maybe bashful or somewhat embarrassed because they're like, I really like I just kind of let this go and I don't really know what's going
Yeah.
on and I feel some amount
Right.
of guilt about it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
look, you know, if everybody did everything 100% in a marriage, then the value of the marriage goes down,
Well,
right?
that's
Like,
a good point.
right?
Yeah.
We need
That's
to
a really
have
good point.
have some different roles. And so it's okay. It's just that now we're shifting roles and now we need
Yeah.
to, kind of move into a different space. But, you talked about kind of the history, and I think that uh, we think of history as something that maybe wasn't lived, right? By
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
those other people in these long ago time. And
Right,
the
in wagons and such,
in
right,
wagons
and
and such, exactly,
bonnets,
in petticoats and
in
barefoot and whatnot,
petticoats,
right?
yeah, that's
but
right, that's
but it's
exactly
not always
right.
that. But the one that you brought up, I know it's not in like chronological order, but this piece about the that women couldn't get credit without a male cosigner, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wasn't that eye-opening to
1974,
you? Yeah,
right? That's
1974,
That doesn't
yeah.
seem that long ago, you
It
know?
doesn't seem that long ago. So
To
this
me,
is what it made
no.
me think of, though, is
I
that
know.
my
Go, Kelly.
mother in
Mhm.
sometime in like the late 90s, right? So
Yeah,
I grew up in Winston-Salem. She
okay.
goes to I don't know which car dealership around here because my dad had always wanted a pickup truck. And she was like, by God, I'm gonna go buy my husband a pickup truck because that is what he likes, which is hilarious because I don't know that the woman knows anything about cars, but
Right.
neither here nor there. So she goes in, she has I mean, she worked full time. She has
Okay.
her quote own money.
Yep, okay.
Could do it. She goes in to buy it, and they said, "Can't buy it. Your husband's not here."
Oh my
And
gosh, in the
she said,
90s?
"Excuse me, what are you talking about? Like, I I can buy it. It doesn't matter
Wow.
that my husband isn't here." And they insisted that they would not sell her this vehicle, right? Without her
Gosh.
husband coming. And so being my mother, instilling a strong sense of of
Yeah.
uh empowerment in me,
Yeah.
right? It's not surprising that she then went to a different place and just said,
Okay.
I'm just not going to do business here. But it's these laws get passed.
Wow.
It
Wow.
takes some time to
Yeah.
actually see them
That's
change, right?
amazing.
And
Yeah.
so that's what popped out at
Gosh.
me, and I just thought I would share.
That's a great story. I mean, I think for a couple reasons. I mean, one, she had her own income, right? So it wasn't like she couldn't
Right.
apply for a loan. And then two, I think it just speaks to, how much women in the household are doing for other people. She went to buy the truck ironically for your dad. I mean, she didn't even want it for her, right? I mean, and
Correct.
she wanted to surprise him, and they were ruining the surprise, first of all.
Right.
Like, if she had
Right.
to get him to come down there, he probably would have been like, "No, don't do it," or
Right.
whatever. And it
Right.
certainly would have been so anticlimactic, right? Instead of, like, I'd imagine she wanted like a big old bow on it or something, like
Right.
those
Exactly.
Christmas commercials where, you find it in the driveway. That's wild. So you said that was in the 90s?
I'm pretty sure that was in the
That was in the
90s. It might have
90s?
been
Gosh.
yeah. And they
Yeah.
also lost the sale. Like, come on now. Like, wouldn't you think a good
Yeah,
salesperson
that's
would be like,
right.
I would like to sell this
Yeah,
truck? But
that's right. I mean, can you imagine the outrage if that happened today?
right. Right.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think just in putting together a bit of some talking points for us, yeah, that was something it stuck out to me because it was the Equal Credit Opportunity Act of 1974, and I was born in 1977. So, to me, I'm like, whoa, I was almost here, at that point.
Right.
And that before that, banks could deny women credit cards or loans or mortgage. They'd have to have, their husband come and sign, or their dad. I mean, and so that just is wild to me. And it's interesting, like, that's a really good point, that it was, that was passed in 74, but, practices, probably went on a whole lot longer than that. And there was another interesting, I guess that was a key year for us because there was also a law passed in 74 related to retirement plans, because prior to that, if you went to work, say my husband and I both went to work for one employer, they might offer him a workplace benefit like a pension, and
Right.
would be able to discriminate and just not give it to me. So that seems crazy for us to think about, that
Right.
was going on, but it clearly was, because they had to pass a law saying it was, that
Right.
they couldn't keep doing that. But yeah, that's really wild. It's just wild. And I thought was interesting too, which I didn't know a lot about, and you may know more, Kelly. There was a Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act in 2009, that strengthened wage discrimination protections, which I was just like, wow.
Yeah, I don't know a ton about it, but I think what's interesting is this piece about, creating something where every time you get a discriminatory paycheck, it resets that 180-day period to file, because a
Okay.
lot of
Yeah.
times you don't know, early on that you can do something, or it takes a long
Yeah.
time to feel empowered to do something because, I mean, I remember being in my very first job, and it took a long time for me to, this was like pre Me Too, right? But
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
that was the experience that I had. It took a long time for people to believe that they can say something a lot of times. And so this allows and affords the clock not to
More
pass, right?
time
Even
to
if it has
okay.
been years, which I think is
Okay.
really, really helpful for folks.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess too, if you're, because we all know, and one of the challenges that women have, which we'll talk more about too, when we do a lot, we haven't had the rights, and then we also don't get paid, as much in a lot of cases, right? Or haven't historically. And so I guess what you're saying here is, like, there's a limit of time, right? If you for you to bring a complaint. But I guess too, you may not realize you're being, because if it's equal pay, I mean, if you're working at a place, you don't always know what everybody else is getting paid, right? So I guess part of it might be, it takes some time to figure out, hey, John is getting, why am I getting $2 less an
Exactly.
hour? And maybe prior to 2009, if I hear you right, they might be like, well, sorry, that was too long ago that we hired you or whatever, and so you can't file a complaint. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it would be like the amount of money that you could recover is now significantly larger
Oh, okay.
what it
Okay. I
is,
see.
right? And
I see.
so, like, if you
Yeah.
got paid something 10 years ago, but you actually, and you don't
I
bring your
see.
lawsuit for 10 years, right? If
Uh,
have a certain amount of time and it just keeps every time you get that paycheck that isn't um or that is
yeah, yeah.
discriminatory, it just resets the clock. So it just
Interesting.
opens up a
Yeah.
lot more.
Yeah,
And I think
yeah.
your point is
Okay.
right. Like you don't always know. Like it's not like people don't talk about how much they make. It's
Sure, sure,
frowned
sure, sure.
upon. And
Yeah, I
so I
think
think
that's interesting. Not to cut you off, but I think particularly for women, don't you think it's a little bit maybe more, I don't know, seen as maybe unfeminine, maybe to talk more about money historically? I
I
get
think
that
it can be.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's generational a lot of times.
Yeah.
And I was trying to think if the feminine piece, I also think there's this piece of, there's a lot of women who are, we're culturally sort of trained not to be too loud, right? And
Yeah.
and
Right. Right.
and you, especially when you're first starting somewhere, like you don't want to be the person
Yeah.
who's noise, whether you're
Yeah.
a man or a woman, but I think it is
Right.
um, harder a lot of times, sort of culturally for women. And so you need some time. And I really think that that's what that gives you.
Yeah, and that's interesting. Like 2000, I mean, I guess when you do the math, 2009 is a while back, I guess, right?
Starting to
but
seem that way.
but it's not that long. I mean, I think we've made a
I
lot of
started practicing
progress.
law in
Yeah.
2000, right?
Okay.
Like, I mean,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
to me, it doesn't seem like that long ago. I got married in
Right.
2009.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that was a big year for you. And
It was a
then
big year for
also
me.
Lily Ledbetter, you must have brought that to the
Into
forefront. Yeah.
fruition. That's exactly what it was.
Right. That's right. You're like, we call up there to President Obama to sign this in law. So because we are making progress, I think, but from what I see, and I'll be interested to see your perspective or hear your perspective on this, Kelly, but I think we still see women with these unique challenges, I think, financially, right? I think the pace, you'd like to think the pay situation is getting better, both through these protections and then also women, standing up for themselves and we do see from data, I mean, a lot of the traditionally women's jobs, in medicine or things like that have actually done okay, but I still think women face a lot of challenges, that maybe men don't see or don't feel some of the same, headwinds.
I think that, not all of it is, we kind of talk about like systems and how systems work as opposed to individual folks who I don't
Hmm.
think mean anything bad, right? Like if I give the benefit of the doubt. So I think my example and is there was a past employer that I worked for, and you know, the men who worked in that law firm pretty much all had stay-at-home spouses, right?
Yeah,
Which is
right,
great.
right.
Like there's nothing
Sure,
wrong with setting up
sure.
like that. But the women there did not have stay-at-home spouses.
Yeah, sure,
And
sure.
so it changes what you are able to
Yeah.
like do in some ways. And it means that I worked just as hard and had to
Hmm.
find time to do all those other things too.
Right,
And so
right.
I wasn't there less because it was very important to me to show up wholly in my job space. And I still had to figure out how I was going to show up wholly in my
Yeah,
home
sure,
space. And
sure, sure.
so
Yeah.
there is a lot to talk about there, but I don't think that like the way that system was set up just worked better for
Hmm.
folks who didn't have all those other things. And part of what I think was, frustrating for me, at least as a younger professional, is I was still operating under the belief that I could do every single thing. right? I could be
Sure. Yeah. Sure. Sure.
110% spouse and 110%,
Right. Right. Right.
parent and
Right.
110%, associate or partner at my firm. And it becomes really challenging.
Yeah. Sure.
Um,
Sure.
then it plays into how fast you get promoted. But I think women in the
Yeah.
law, there's a lot of women lawyers, right? It's
Yeah.
just that
Sure.
there aren't as many female partners in big firms, right? So
Okay. Okay.
I think about family law, there's a lot of like women. It's, I think,
Yeah.
predominantly women, and a lot of
Okay.
us own firms because it gives us
Yeah.
the ability to set hours and, create sort of a more balanced life. And we're still giving a lot to our clients and to our profession.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, because I think especially in some traditional workplaces, if you've got two working parents and a child is sick, somebody has to either work from home or stay out, and I think that's maybe different today. But pre-COVID, when you didn't really work from home that much, I think there was kind of a black eye, right, on that person that stayed out more, even if they were as productive, right? And I think that is a challenge. I think that sometimes women face more, is that there's an expectation, and then also a desire. As a mom too, if my kids are sick, I mean, I also want to be with them, right? Even
Absolutely. One of the things
yeah,
that I joke about with Jason, and I joke about it, but it's hard. I'll just name
yeah,
that it's hard, is that, what it felt like to me. Now, it could be my perception was off, right? What it felt like to me is that if I needed to leave work to go
yeah,
get a sick kid, it was like, "Ugh, there goes Kelley, has to go get
yeah.
a sick kid."
Right,
But
right,
if Jason
right.
does that, Jason gets a, oh my gosh, he's a
Dad of the
great
year.
dad. He's doing
Yeah,
a wonderful
right,
thing.
right, right.
And that double standard is
Yeah,
very tough to stomach, because what I want is
yeah,
not that we both get the eye roll. What I want is that we both get the applause, that we both get
yeah,
the
right.
affirmation that we are doing.
Yeah,
I will say that I think that is slowly shifting in lots of places.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I could see that, and I mean, and I'm sure that was probably part of the reason, maybe not the only reason, but one reason that you own your own firm now, right? Is to so you don't have to worry about that, and likewise, I also own my own firm, and that's certainly makes those things easier. Is that you don't even worry about that. Ultimately, we have responsibilities to our clients as long as we're meeting that. And hopefully able to be there for our families in the way that they need us, because it is this, dual mandate that makes it tough. And, um, and I think you're right. That does make it hard on people in certain, especially larger employers, maybe to move ahead. It certainly sounds like that's the case in the law field.
Yeah, I think it is. Not, again, not broad brush strokes for everybody. I think we're making a
Yeah,
lot of headway. And I think that, women being in like part of the workforce has all sorts of benefits, but from a
sure.
societal perspective, but from a household perspective, having dual incomes, it has a lot of benefits. But I think
Sure.
I just want to take a pause and say, we've kind of talked about that. And I had a client once who I think felt kind of intimidated by the fact that I was a working mom. There was another person who, the other collaborative attorney was a working mom, and
Hmm.
I think was worried about judgment in a space
Oh, because she
where,
did not.
because
Yeah.
she did not. And so
Hmm.
what I want to take a step back and say is that, you know, for people, for women specifically, since this is, we're kind of focusing on women and financial security, right? When women choose and when families choose to stay in the home and do the work, that they are contributing to the wealth of
Yeah.
their family. And
Yeah,
it
that's
is
true.
it is not just that it's husband's money, right? It is
Mhm. Right.
it is a
Right,
team
right.
that is created, And that one of the ways we can see and honor that is, at least in our divorce laws, is that there is this presumption that if you're going to, when you take all your stuff, when you get a divorce, that it's going to be divided 50-50, that what is
Hmm.
equal is what is equitable. And the reason that is because, of course, the person who is, staying at home is affording their spouse the ability to do some things. And so that is creating wealth for the family, not just for him. And what I find
Hmm.
that sometimes that's really, really hard for the spouse who has worked
Yeah.
stomach. They think this is my money, and I have
Right. Right.
that
Right.
we
Right.
as a
Right.
family have. So I'm glad
Yeah.
that that's there.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, and that's like back to your example. If their career need, it's just not an option for them to own their own firm. They got to move up that corporate ladder for the household. That traditionally the mom, staying at home allows that other partner to not get the eye roll, right? And to get the promotion and then move up. And so that, yeah, and there's nothing wrong with, staying at home. I think, a lot, and I can think of several client situations where that was the choice they made. A lot of times it's they're going to stay at home for a certain window of time while children are a certain age and then re-enter the workforce later is very common. Um, and there's not a thing wrong with that. I always think it's important, at least when I see that. I mean, and I guess two things. One is I've noticed over my career, because shockingly how time gets away from you, and I've been an advisor over 20 years now, so I've really seen a lot. And I think early on in my career, just to that point, Kelly, if you had it based somewhat on age, but certainly I see that changing too. But if you had a stay-at-home parent, the working person controlled all the money. They were in charge. They knew where everything was. They made the big decisions sort of unilaterally, right? And now I do think that has really changed a lot, in that if the family has made the decision, okay, mom's going to stay home. That's what, hopefully that's what she wants. If she is staying home, wants to be there. And I think that's really great. And that affords the working parent this opportunity, and that they're going to earn more because of that. The stay at home mom now, I think, is seen as competent, to deal with all the finances. So like in those cases, I'm thinking about people that I work with where, that because that job frankly is so demanding on that person, maybe there's a tremendous amount of travel or really long hours. That stay at home parent is then, they're handling everything, and so they're my main point of contact, for savings goals, for investment decisions and things like that, because they're now seen as, your part of your contribution is managing the household, including managing the finances.
Right. Yeah. I see that all the time where there are a lot of people who are like, I just make the money. Like, I just make the money.
Yeah,
She does everything
everything
else,
else.
right?
Sure, sure, sure,
And it's
sure.
it's meant as a real compliment, right? And I think that
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
really beautiful when people, even when they're going through these hard times, right? Because their marriage has failed, when they're able to see and acknowledge, sometimes with their attorney's help, the contributions of the other person, because really so many
sure.
of us, what we want is to be validated for what our contributions are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I think that what, the other piece of this, sort of going back into history, is that married women couldn't fully control property, right?
Yeah,
For
yeah,
a
yeah.
very long time.
Even in the early 1900s, right? I think we found,
Correct.
and
And
probably
it's,
practically longer than that, like back to your mom's
oh,
example.
exactly. And so, you think about what that means to get a divorce, right? Like, divorce
Yeah,
is in
yeah,
it is a very, like, I'm not wishing it upon people, because I think it is a death of sorts, right?
yeah,
Um, and the fact that we have these laws on the books that, largely protect women, because women can now own this property and they get custodial rights. And we're not talking about
Sure.
kids,
Sure.
but like that they get that because it used to be that women wouldn't, right? They couldn't get a divorce
Sure.
and
Yeah.
they wouldn't get their kids if they did get a divorce. And
Yeah.
the finances, it was not going to happen for them. And so
Sure. Yeah.
it's interesting to think of divorce as almost this tool of empowerment for some folks that just didn't
Sure.
exist as an option, 125.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So you'd be trapped in that case and largely because of the finances, right? I
Right.
mean, so
Exactly.
which is changing. I think there certainly are still some challenges like the research I saw, women in general still now earn 82 cents on the dollar, even today. And probably for some of those reasons we've already, talked about. I mean, they're perceived as maybe being there more, maybe some unconscious bias, things like that. I think it's maybe particularly challenging for, women of color too. And I think what was surprising and I think concerning for me just in trying to help people build wealth. That's, one of the big things we try to do is to help people, get on a path where they're building wealth. Is that the wealth gap? We've talked about the income gap, but the wealth gap is huge between women and men, and particularly between women of color and men, particularly white men, and I think that has to do with a lot of the things that we've talked about. Lower pay in general, time out of the workforce. Maybe not having a great advocate like you if they go through a divorce, right?
Well, but also like you, right? Like I remember us talking years ago
Mhm.
about how, there are a lot of women who are going to choose to have the marital home, right? And they
Yeah,
choose to keep the marital home because it's very emotional a lot of times. It keeps
right. Sure,
consistency
sure.
for kids. There's
Yep.
all these things in it. And it might be and often is a poor financial decision, right? Because
Yeah,
it is not rooted in this understanding of sort of long-term building of wealth, which might serve your interests long term, and instead is very focused on what does my family need right in this moment. And so
yeah.
that was eye-opening for me. And I tell clients all the time that so that not to say don't keep the
y-
marital home, but to
Right,
say if you do it, let's think about what the pros and cons are, right? Because there
right,
are some
right,
pros and
right.
cons for your long-term financial
That's
future.
right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, because that's maybe a home that they had as a family that doesn't work, for her as an individual or either one of them maybe as an individual, and has these costs to operate that, your 401k wouldn't, right? And so
Exactly.
whoever when it's
Exactly.
as things shake out, if mom thinking of the family first, is like, well, I'll keep the home and just to kind of keep everybody normal and together as much as possible, then that person becomes, an asset that's not, not appreciating as much, takes a lot to maintain, as opposed to something that takes practically nothing to maintain and then grows at a potentially faster rate. So I think it's that sort of I shouldn't say lack of education. I don't know that that's really fair, but just, you know,
Well, I think it's okay to say that sometimes we're not educated in all the things, right?
sure,
Like
sure, sure.
we don't have to be. That's why we go to
That's what people
experts
are
to talk
for.
about
Yeah,
things. Exactly. To say like,
yeah,
help me understand because I have this piece. I'm not going to do my own taxes anymore. Like that would be a bad
yeah,
idea
sure,
and it's
sure.
okay. I'm not educated in it. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think the other piece that is hard is that there is this piece where a lot of times women are taking steps away from the workforce. Either, I mean, I remember when I was pregnant with my younger daughter, my law partner said to me, "Well, you know how this happens." Right? And I was
Mm.
like, I mean, yes. Like, why would you say that to me? Right? Like it creates an
Yeah,
atmosphere that
yeah,
that doesn't feel all that great. And while I suspect
yeah,
there was a fear that I wasn't going to come back into the
yeah.
workforce, right? It didn't
Right,
actually
right.
environment to do that, to
Yeah.
want to come back. And I think about, what would it mean to women to know that, okay, yeah, you're expecting whatever. We're so happy to have you. Like, we're so happy you're here, and
Sure.
your income, we're going to support you through this, and we're going to pour into you, and then you're going to then come back, and you're going to continue to, like, be in this place where we are affirming. And guess
Yeah.
what? When that happens, I'm going to, provide value for this company, right? Um,
Yeah.
and
Sure.
so I
Sure.
hate that those things exist because,
Right. Right.
um, I think it's detrimental to a woman's ability to support her family. But also it's
Right.
detrimental to the company itself because, it probably creates an environment where it seemed like a bad thing, right?
Yeah, right. I think we've probably all heard stories of women trying to hide that they're pregnant, at
Gosh,
work for as long as possible and things like that, and just hopefully that's changing with women, more women in the workforce. I know, like in our my field, which is financial services, I can think back years ago when I started, I might go to a meeting and be the only woman there, or
right.
one other woman there maybe with me. I remember specifically being in a continuing education meeting and being pregnant and find there was another woman there who was pregnant. And like it was like a magnet. We sort of drew each other in, like you're like, wow, there's another one of us. So
There's
that
another
becomes
unicorn.
yeah, it becomes more normal. Like, I mean, like we were really pregnant too. So
Yeah.
like we stood out for sure. But I do think it's changing in our field. And I think that'll be helpful
I think
for
the
women
more
just having
women
some
you have.
confidence. Yeah.
Right. And to see what, I mean, like, that's the other thing is, like, in different places I've been, there haven't been a lot of role models. So I had a super
Yeah.
strong role model as my mother. Like, my mother worked through this,
Yeah.
but I mean, she came back to work after my brother was born after 4 weeks. I mean, like, I just can't. I was like, I don't
She's a
understand the words
beast.
you're saying.
Did
She's
she
a beast.
drive that truck or did
Oh my
she like
gosh.
it?
That's exactly right. She wanted to drive the truck there, but they wouldn't sell it to her.
It
So,
was-
we had to go. But, my hope is that, I can be a role model, right? I have an associate named
Sure.
Lindsay. Lindsay's
Yeah.
lovely. If Lindsay chooses to have children, right? I'm just like, we can talk about it. It's your choice, right? But you
Sure.
don't,
Yeah,
if
sure.
we literally had this conversation, not 2 days ago to say, hey, it's your choice, but this is an environment where if you're 6 weeks or 8 weeks pregnant and you feel like doo-doo, like, you're allowed to say that, right? And, like, we're going to
Yeah.
create
Oh,
space for
sure.
that.
For
And
sure.
we're going to
Yeah.
figure out what maternity leave looks like. And and yes, we are now modeling. I'm modeling, my
Yeah.
paralegal, Jess is modeling what it looks like to have children and work full time and do it in
Yeah.
a way that creates some balance and I think benefit. I mean, my clients benefit from the fact that I have children, right? They benefit from the
Yeah,
life
sure.
experience
Sure, sure, sure.
that I bring to the table. So hopefully, the more we do this, the more we model what it looks
Yeah.
like well.
Yeah, I think so. And I think really hear a theme of confidence, right? Of really building women up, whether they're choosing to stay at home, have confidence and assurance of what you're contributing, to the household, or if you're choosing or you need to work for your family, to go at that with your head high and yeah, I'm pregnant, and I can, or I have young children, but that doesn't prevent me from being, really excellent at what I do and really contributing a lot. And I think sometimes, to your point, like contributing more because, you're part of our job is to empathize and understand the client needs, right? And if we're a mom too, if somebody comes to me to say, how do I save for my child's education? I can say, well, here's what we did for our kids, and so that may not want to do the same thing, but I think that gives them some comfort, that you've gone through that with them, and I think that's actually been, for me, I think more helpful. As I think as I first started as an advisor, there was more concern like being a woman might be a hindrance, to me, and that, especially back at that point where you have men making the money and controlling the money in the household. Are they going to trust their financial guidance to a woman? But I can't really say. I mean, I'm sure there were cases where, I've lost opportunities, but I really think if anything, it's been more of a growth opportunity for me because I've stood out, in the workplace, in our field, as someone who, listens to women. Because I think a lot of meetings, a lot of people would go in to meet with their financial advisor, and I've had women share like they just basically ignore them, and it's
Right,
really
right.
unfortunate, particularly if they're a stay-at-home mom. I always really try to draw them in, even if, like, to your point, I mean, and it's not always the mom. As a household, you sort of have to decide who's going to be the main person, to handle the
Right.
finances. But one thing I always stress to people is transparency and getting people on the same page in terms of goals and things. It doesn't mean everybody has to handle every little purchase, every little statement, but I really try to get women involved somehow, right? Because I'm sure you probably run into cases where, maybe that stay-at-home mom has no idea what the money even is, right?
Well, and I get a lot of folks who just, not everybody who has a consult with a divorce attorney gets divorced, right? A lot of
Yeah.
people are
Okay.
trying to
Yeah.
figure
Yeah.
out what it is they want and get some more
Right.
information. And so I've had numbers of clients come in where, they're concerned about their finances and they're not sure whether they what they should be doing. And I go,
Yeah.
this is a great opportunity to ask questions. Like, let's go home. Let's talk about how, like, maybe we talk about having a conversation um to say, hey, I'm feeling really, really concerned because I don't really know what's going on. And I would like to be part of it. And
Sure.
I'm very fine for you to kind of be the point person, but to your point, Jennifer, to say, hey, but I would like to know, what we have. And
Yeah.
I would like to
Yeah.
be included on some of these conversations. And people are like, and that's okay. Going, yeah, yeah, it's okay. If that's what you need to feel peace and comfort, then that's what
Yeah.
we need to do.
I think it's not just okay. I think it's really important. I mean, because a lot of times, one of the other challenges I think women face, at least when it comes to like retirement planning or, planning their finances, is we live longer, right? And so
Yes,
when you think
right.
about uh, that, I mean, hopefully you won't ever go through a divorce, but we often find ourselves as women single, whether it's because we're younger and have not yet married, or, unfortunately we've lost a spouse. And a lot of times, if you haven't been involved in the fight, you may not even know where things are or where to start. And so I think that's really important for you to at least have some involvement in the family finances, and your own. So if you're a single mom, you're a single woman out there, or a single mom, you have no choice probably if you're a single mom. But if you're young and haven't, maybe haven't married, take that initiative. I think it's really important, and it's not just important, I think, for men, but also for women, maybe even more so, to get started early.
Absolutely.
And
I remember
because
my
we do live
dad,
longer.
yeah, my dad gave me a number. I think I was in early college. And I remember that he gave me $1,000 in
Okay.
in some sort of, I think maybe he started a Roth for me. There was
Oh, okay.
some, and
Yeah.
and I was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
thank you. Like, what am I supposed to do? Like,
Yeah. Sure.
this is
Yeah.
not,
Sure.
but it's this idea of like starting early and
Right.
like little bits to me. I mean, I say little bits, but that felt like a lot of money
Yeah.
to me, particularly at the
Sure. Yeah.
time.
Sure. Sure. Sure.
And we get started. And so that's the other thing I think we can do as employers, right? Of folks. It's like when Lindsay started, I said, I think it's really important that you invest in your retirement, and this is how I'm going to help
Right.
you do that. And, you know, here, talk to the financial person, and like make sure
Yeah.
you understand what's going on, and have a good sense of this, because young people, you don't know kind of what their financial history
Sure.
like and what's been modeled. And so being able to say like, hey, here are some things that you can do at any stage, but often early, like you say, can be hugely beneficial long term.
Yeah, and studies have shown women are less confident about that, so they don't know where to start. So they don't start, you know. And so a lot of times they wait until they get married, or even then maybe it's, you know, the husband takes that responsibility, but we do tend to end up single at some point. And so um you know, I just would encourage people to encourage women in particular to, you know, think about their financial future. I think it's, you know, we do so much for our families and in terms of our labor and our time and energy. But what a great gift, you know, we could give our family by being, you know, financially secure. It's probably the best thing we could, you know, we could do for them.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that financial security, it's kind of like if you like remember back to your uh, Psych 101, right? And there's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Yeah,
At that
right.
base level, right? Before you can hit any
Yeah.
sort of enlightenment, you gotta
Yeah,
gotta
that's a
have
good point. Yeah.
safety, you gotta have security, you have to have like those needs met. And I think that when you have that kind of um, as strong of a financial footing as you
Like a
can,
foundation.
right? A
Yeah.
foundation, then we build so much on top of that. It allows for so many other things. And so I think that there are a lot of folks out there who are being very how do I say this? You know, there are folks who are the sort of the breadwinner or the provider and financially, and there's a stay-at-home spouse, often a woman, like we've talked about, and their husband is setting up an IRA for them, right? They don't have any
Yeah.
idea that
Right.
they're putting it away, and they're being wonderful financial stewards for the family. It's
Yeah.
just that she doesn't know. And
Yeah.
I've
Right.
had a lot of people who say, I've been happy to tell her that. I'm happy to share that with her, but she's never really been interested in it. And
Yeah.
so I think that it's also incumbent upon, you know, because there are plenty of men listening to this podcast, right? And to say, look, like it is really wonderful to be a supportive spouse. It's really wonderful to be a dad that is teaching your daughter or your son how to have these conversations. It is really wonderful to support women and say that yes, I want you to know these things. Yes, it's like come to the table. Let me show you this stuff. You don't have to be involved in the minutia if you don't want to be, but every year let's at least have a conversation about what the
Yeah.
like, right? And so that
Yeah.
everybody feels like it's transparent. And I think doing things like that also prevents you from coming to see me, right? Because so many
Yeah.
divorces
Right.
are about
Right.
finances, right? Or they're about
That's right.
communication and
That's
the lack
right.
of
Yeah.
communication. And
That's
just
right.
be sit down at the kitchen table and say, like, let's just make sure we're on the same page. I think you're going
That's
to get
right.
out ahead of some of those conflicts that none of us want to like ultimately have ending a marriage.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. So hopefully we're preventing some divorces, you know, here today
But
in
I
honor
hope.
of Mother's Day, right?
Right, right. Exactly.
I
Exactly.
know we've talked about a lot here today, and Adam's been rather silent out there. So you're
Probably for the best.
yeah.
That's for the best.
No,
That
no,
was
Adam, I know you're a
tremendous.
great dad, and I'm
No,
sure a great husband
I've learned a
too.
lot,
So
and it's important to hear that perspective. And I think I learned some things that I can do to have conversations
sure,
with my
sure,
wife, just to, it's not about who's taking on more or less responsibility based on their gender. It's just about your own situation and
sure.
talking about what works best in terms of what each person is doing for the household. So
That's
Right.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That really helps with the whole team mentality, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not
Absolutely.
better or worse. It is we are a team,
Yep.
and the teammates have different roles, and that's okay.
Mhm.
Let's honor that, and let's love on what those roles are.
Yeah. Well,
And make
as we
sure to love on moms too this
that's
weekend,
right.
right?
All the moms.
All the
That's right.
moms.
Love the moms. Yes, we
That's
can
right.
all get behind that.
That's right.
So
That's right.
before we close out, Kelley, you've been a fantastic guest. Give us a chance to now learn about where if people want to talk to you about something going on in their life, how can they reach you?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I have a website is a great place to start. It is gondringlaw.com. It'll tell you a little bit about kind of what it is that I do and about me, and about Lindsay and Jess because we're a team. And that's generally the best way to get in touch.
Okay. And Jennifer, remind the listeners how they can reach you.
Yeah, absolutely. Check us out online too. We're Three Magnolias Financial Advisors, all spelled out. You can call us if you want to. That number's 336-701-1600. We are local, just like Kelly's group. And just want to wish all the moms happy Mother's Day. And we hope this has been helpful for everybody, but especially the moms out there.
Yeah. Well, happy Mother's Day to both of you, and thank you so much
Thanks,
for the
Adam.
conversation.
Thanks, guys.